Okay.
Yeah, it's starting.
Yeah, they all in?
Everyone is getting in, yes.
Okay. Just put a thumbs up when they're in.
Yep.
Perfect. Hello, I'm Martin Evans. Welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled Crash for Cash. I'm joined by two esteemed guest speakers, Gareth Jones, Group Fleet Compliance Manager from Speedy, and Peter Milchard, Head of Training from Applied Driving Techniques. Peter is also a Director of the AFP. We'll be recording today's session, which will be made available on our members' website. Please raise any questions on the team chat and we'll try to answer your questions during the session. So, fleets are especially concerned about not just the disruption that fraudulent accidents cause, but the impact on the premiums. The only solution is to control and reduce the number and cost of claims you're making. So, here are the objectives for today's session. So we want to understand the size of the problem, understand where the scam model is going, the three typical incident patterns that need to be distinguished, recognising the red flags from the road to the claim file, response model, the three stages that we can actually intervene, and share what's happening in the real world and practical defensive driver behaviours. So the problem. Over to you, Peter, if you can describe the problem that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Martin, for the intro at the beginning there. So yeah, although my job is head of training for a driver training organisation, I spent a huge amount of my career working within the insurance sector. And, you know, from our point, the focus for me before obviously going into the problem is while we focus this on company car and van drivers, it should actually apply to every one of us. So anybody that does drive, we need to be aware of the potential for fraudulent claims. Certain examples, and obviously a part of this webinar will tease out some of those sort of criteria. One of them sort of like where fraudsters target. They target lone drivers or commercial vehicles. And just to understand a little bit, but to put a bit of a context behind where we're at now, this is data from the latest data we got, which is unfortunately still 2023, but it just gives us an idea of where fraudulent claims activity really has a big issue on the insurance industry. Now 1.1 billion is estimated of insurance fraud was committed within the period of 2023. Historically, people will be aware of the sort of the bogus travel insurance claims that people used to put in, or you know, home fraud claims for TVs, etc. that there's just issues with, but it's been massively overtaken over the years as a percentage from fraudulent claims in the motor sector. So this is really just showing that out of 1.1 billion, quite a huge number of that motor scams is over 50% of insurance fraud is now through motor scams. So and as we can see that actually almost probably disproportionately really now, but the cost of that is spiraling out of control. So if we can just go on to the next slide. Although we thought it wasn't going to get any worse, and it's been an epidemic problem for many years, the type of fraudulent activity is changing. And there's a sort of a niche that's with the advent of sort of Uber Eats, Deliveroo, etc., and the reliance on moped driving activity. What the industry has seen is a significant increase up from the cash for crash targeted through moped drivers. So we're not going to go into too much detail on this today, but other than the fact that the insurance industry for motor insurance fraud really has tackled quite a lot, as much as they could do for cash for crash. But what then happens is there's another route to market that comes through that the fraudsters do identify, and this is the sort of the hot topic of the moment, really, is moped drivers. And the reason why I say that is one of the takeaways I would always say is that drivers need to be aware of where the fraud for the future or the current is actually coming from. So quite a lot of challenges in that sector, and where we're all asking for our food to be delivered to home via one of those sort of mechanisms of transport, we can see the issue. Just to put a little bit of context behind it, the average cost of to buy a moped is probably between £2,000 to £3,000 to £4,000 in a region. But what we're seeing is when one of these when a moped is involved in fraudulent claims activity, claims can be going upwards of £10,000 plus. And I think one of the largest ones that I saw was probably about £50,000. And that was purely on rental alone. And you think, well, how does that work? If you can buy one for £2,500, £3,000, why have we got such a huge claim? So we'll come on to that in a couple of slides' time. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. Just for those that may not be aware of the focus of Cash for Crash, I'm sure most of us on the webinar today are, but the three levels of Cash for Crash. One's what was deemed as the induced incident or accident, and this is really where fraudsters pick on an innocent third-party driver, which is what we class as they had that instant. So we'll look at, as we see on here, that like brake lights, doing wrong behaviours to make the innocent third party be likely to have been deemed as causing the crash in the first place. Then we go on to staged accidents, which is where two or more participants, i.e. fraudsters, go into having a collision so that they can both gain out of that through the insurance, and they'll generally tend to split the rewards that they get from the insurance claim. And then the third one is really ghost accidents. These seem to be forever and a day being part of the issue. There's never been a claim, but it's fabricated paperwork and passengers. Coming back to the moped scenario as well at the moment, what we're seeing is there's a lot of intimidation from the moped driver. So basically what happens, the moped driver stages an accident. It's then deemed as the third party at fault. Then they can get very, very aggressive to try and get your details. So part of the details would be insurance information, and some of them are going down the route of driver licenses. So getting lots of personal information, and also trying to get cash out of those individuals as well. So and what we're seeing is those ghost accidents are being generated through false documentation that has been given at the scene of a crash, if that makes some level of sense to you. Next slide, please.
Sorry,
Yep.
Peter. Is it, Gareth, is this something you're experiencing as well within your fleet?
Yeah, sometimes, in the event of an incident, and I say an incident, some parties can get, slightly unhappy with the situation, and we always tell our guys, just remain calm. But what we introduced is a bump card. So half of it is our information for them to gather, half of it is the information to give to the third party. And just offer that information to the third party, nothing else, no private details whatsoever.
That's a great practical idea.
Because at the end of the day, like Peter says, and I'll come on to this a bit later with some of the what we call the, probably induced stage and ghost. Fraudsters are also now targeting the older generation for having telling them that they've caused the incident, but if you give me this amount of money, then we won't go through the insurance, and and that's another one that I'm starting to see quite a bit of.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gareth.
Good. Yeah. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. So actually, as I mentioned, I've been in the insurance industry for quite a long period of time, and this is sort of built really more from an insurance claims handling protocol. But I think this is so relevant, particularly the at scene type of information that we're just going to sort of pick up here, that, what are the red flags that, sometimes we have to appreciate that, not every crash on the road is a fraudulent claim. It might sometimes feel like that, but we do have genuine instances where people have had a crash. Okay. But some of the tips that people would look at, particularly from a fraud investigation point, we're looking at, what was the behaviour of the vehicle ahead? Was it slowing down? Was it stopping? Was it braking with no rationale? We see this, and Gareth will probably allude to this as well. Even on motorway driving, you'll see people that just what we deem as slam-ons, from that part. So these are sort of bits of information to be aware. And I think this is so invaluable for drivers to be aware of this ahead. So we talk a lot about driver training. I'm responsible for training for a big organization, but really what we need to do is we need to address proactively that every driver is aware of these sort of pieces of information. So don't just think, well, that's a bit of strange behavior. First and foremost,
it's a bit like the people who they start looking at a roundabout to go when there's a car in front of them. You shouldn't be looking until it's your turn to go.
Yeah. So some stuff. I mean, there was historically, it was silly stuff. There was signals on vehicles. So on exhaust pipes, you used to get like a Smurf. Those of us that probably know Smurfs from the past, and that basically was an indicator that if you're at a roundabout, it's okay to crash into me, because if you crash into me, we'll go 50-50 on the claims cost. So it's this sort of intel that people need to have. Why do people have Smurfs on the exhaust pipe? A little bit challenging as we move over to electric vehicles, because there isn't an exhaust to hang it off, but that's a story for another day. But some of the
I've
other
never heard of Smurf vehicles, Peter.
No, a Smurf, a cuddly Smurf on the back of an exhaust, not actually a Smurf vehicle. So other parties are unusually calm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but most people would be not used to dealing with an incident. If your drivers are involved with incidents all the time and it's just standard procedure, that's probably more of a worrying signal than any of them. But most of us will not be prepared for at the scene, whereas these people take control of the incident, so they are asking for all the information, whereas we might be in shock. Injuries appear maybe disproportionate to the impact, so slow speed maneuvering. Most of my life I've worked on the fact that the majority of incidents are slow speed maneuvering, and then generally your injuries, of course you can sustain injuries, but the level of sustained injury can be significantly higher than actually what the effects of the crash were, the impact. And as I've mentioned before, pressure to hand over documentation, admit liability, and Gareth mentioned as well that if you give instructions out that people can go to, then that puts us in a much better position, that even on those instructions, do not give information that you don't need to give. And there's a big story about that where the police get involved as well. So that's for another day. And then what people would look at when the claim is being processed from an insurance point of view, on the right hand side there is things such as like the number of passengers has changed since the incident to actually when it's reported. So I witnessed a situation in central London with one of the old Route Master buses where people jump on the back of it. The bus was half empty. It was involved in a genuine fault incident, at slow speed. By the time everyone attended, including the police, that bus was full of passengers. So that was really more the fact that they're all claiming that they were on the bus at the time.
I mean, it's interesting. Ask Gareth to intervene here, because we were talking about the other day that there are now standard tariffs, for want of a better word, for things like whiplash, and you said the game's changing, Gareth, so people are now doing things like claiming for teeth and things like that, as kind of moving the goalposts as to what to claim for with these things.
So I suppose really, because we all know that people are struggling to find dentists, so people are now starting to claim for teeth injury, which of course is one of those injuries really that you can't 100% ascertain how damage or how much pain they're actually in from their teeth, and it's one of those things really where they can really start to make a claim about if they've been pushed forward into the steering wheel.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Gareth.
Yeah, and on that as well, to talk about the mopeds. Don't want to talk exclusively about mopeds, but what we tend to find
You're
is
quite anti-mopeds here, Peter, aren't you?
No. But the issue is it's a big issue, it's a big challenge, and it's affecting all of our insurances for private car insurance. So you and I own cars, so it's worth the relevance of where this is actually stemming from. So as I mentioned, very low cost to buy a brand new moped. Most of them are purchased second hand, but most of those delivery drivers actually rent them. They rent them from organisations, and this is where we get the problems, because when there's an incident, there's extortionate repair delays, storage charges, higher costs, so the claim goes up and up and up. So you can see why people unfortunately are doing it, but it's a big issue. What we also look at is linked addresses, phone numbers, suppliers. It all tends to come back from the same thing. Some of us would have been aware where whiplash injury still is prevalent, but it's not as prevalent, and that was really where the mechanism was in place. And I think, coming back to what Martin was alluding to there, that there's values that's placed onto those injuries as well a lot of the time now. So that's sort of stemmed this. But what we can't do is we can't always control the repair, the storage, or the credit hire risk. And that's what is the big issue for the insurers at this stage. I'm going to look. It's repeated again about mopeds, so I think we can go on to the next slide. Really, I think we all know about the issue in mopeds, but don't eliminate.
Is credit hire still such a big thing as it used to be, Peter, with extortionate sort of credit hire things going on? And
yeah, it's there is efforts to contain it, and efforts have contained it, but I think where Gareth has alluded to, we're looking at where is the money going to be made out of in the future. So where the storage charges are quite well controlled now, and this comes back to the fact of why insurers want you to report the instance as quick as possible through to them, because they can take early control over that incident. And actually, the word of warning would also be, if you're having an incident that for whatever reason you're not even going to put through the insurance, I would still be very guarded at that, because it could come back to bite you in the future. But what we're seeing is the money comes from different areas. It's not necessarily from the credit hire, although it probably still is for the mopeds. It's the stuff that Gareth was talking about, the dental, the dental pain. No one can disprove that you've got dental pain. So, and that's a little bit, I mean, go to the dentist now and you need to take a mortgage out just to get a checkup, so the situation is it's where the easy way is to get the money. Fraudsters are generally quite lazy people. So if they can find a way of getting the money quicker and easier, they'll go to that route. And what it is, it's the insurers trying to stop that sort of leakage. But it takes time to pick up on a lot of this stuff. We normally actually at this point talk about the Insurance Fraud Bureau, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but sitting behind the scenes is a not-for-profit organisation that is very supportive of the insurance industry, who are collecting lots of data in terms of the type of instance, sort of intelligence of the fraud activity of the future, so that all of us can start to get better prepared for what is going to happen in the future. So look, we're all paying unnecessarily for people to get fraudulent claims. So we need to tackle it as best as we possibly can. The mopeds came out of the blue, so that just caught people off guard. So that's where we're moving to. Okay, next slide, please.
I was going to say, we're including some information on the Insurance Fuel Bureau within this presentation, because actually they've got helplines and things that can help our customers, fleets when they're in trouble. So it's a really good organisation. So yeah.
Good. Okay. So really, intervene at 3 moments. Basically, let's keep this as simple as possible, right? The key bit to avoid a fraudulent claim is to not be involved in the claim in the first place. Now, I know that sounds so easy, but when we're talking about, there's so many indicators that you and I probably, hopefully through this webinar, if you wasn't aware, you might be able to start thinking as you're going on your next journey, thinking, this looks a bit strange. Why is there lots of people in the car constantly looking backwards, looking, and what they're doing is they're preempting where they're going to have that staged accident. So really what defensively, we need to make sure that we're in control of our vehicle and preventing it. So if somebody is driving erratically, I mean, I was driving the other day and somebody was constantly on the back of my tail, on driving down a dual carriageway. What you need to do is you just need to manage the situation, step back, reduce down, move out the way, don't let you be the target or your fleet be the target of the fraudster. They will target you, particularly if they know it's a company owned vehicle, because they do know that it's insured. And there's brand reputation and lots of stuff that goes with that. So we do need to look at how we prevent it. The dash cams, as Martin said, it's really important. That's probably more the reaction to the event afterwards, so you can prove that the moped driver, what tends to happen, they stop in front of you and then they push their moped into the front of your vehicle, so it looks as though you've hit them. So the dash cam would be invaluable, wouldn't it, to defend that. But yeah, the importance of drivers doing the right thing, and then going on to detection. This is where we're moving into the incidents happened and how can we manage the cost moving forward. Try to report it as quick as you possibly can. Most people will be aware of prompt first notification of loss. Lots of insurers are very much pushing for you to report them at scene, from those point of view. But actually, do we ask the right questions as an industry? I'm talking from an insurance industry. Do we ask the right questions at the scene of an incident? Are we aware of what questions they're going to ask us? So maybe part of the education for drivers is what information is likely to be asked, because most of us only know what we're going to be asked for when we're involved in the collision. And one of the biggest issues I tend to find is one of the questions that most insurers ask is who owns the vehicle? And actually a driver might not know who does actually own the vehicle. So just use that as an example.
Yeah, I think it might be worthwhile, Peter and Gareth, just putting an example of what a bump card looks like that Gareth alluded to earlier, because that's a great idea.
I'll find it. I'll put it in the chat. I can see Steve Openshaw from the Eric Wright group on, and I've worked quite closely with Steve, and we share best practice a lot. So I know that I've taken some of what Steve does in his team as well, because they have some great sort of, like, what should we say, snippets that you can take out into the real world.
Yeah, and again, alluding back to this credit hire, which can escalate out of all control. So that's all the more reason for this first notice of loss to be handled by your insurance company. Yeah.
And I'll just finish off on that point number 3, investigate. You may well ask yourself why so many questions are being asked by accident management companies, insurance companies at the scene or shortly after that. And it's about trying to get as best evidence as possible and then relaying that does this marry up and match with what people are suggesting they require for, like, injury costs, replacement hire, etc. So it's almost like goes in a circle, really, doesn't it, really? But yeah, the key to me is, don't view driver safety as purely compliance, more the fact of helping the drivers to avoid getting into these issues in the first place. That's a key bit for me. I'll probably hand over to Gareth now, really, if that's okay.
Yeah, so thanks, Peter. So over to Gareth, really. Gareth, from the sort of real world viewpoint of what's actually happening out in the field, out in the roads, as it were, and practical defensive driving behaviours that can be adopted. So I know one of your favourites at the moment is the first one, Gareth, which is the phone one, which is the absolute gotcha. So over to you, Gareth.
Yeah, so the first one really is a simple one. So, the scammers now are looking for people that are actively on their mobile phones, and then they're on a dual carriageway when they overtake you, and then they actually drive into you, and then obviously when you pull over, they say, well, you drove into me, you were on the phone. And if they deny it, they then call the police, who then has the right to get the record. So, that's the first one really. So it's that's a double reason why you shouldn't be on your phone while you're driving. One, because you can't do two things at once, and you shouldn't be on it, it's illegal. And the second thing is because you are then looking at a potential fraud. And at the end of the day, if it comes to the fact where the police then attend and then they download your records, not only are you at fault for their damage, and they'll get their vehicle repaired, and then exactly like Peter said earlier, with the credit hire, etc., etc. It goes on. So yeah, warn people of that.
I still find it amazing going along the motorway, still by the amount of people actually holding the mobile phone in what look to be quite modern cars that you'd expect to have hands-free within the car, but yeah, they're still doing it and leaving themselves wide open, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, just defensive driving is about the word coast, and without going on and teaching people that I'm sure they've heard it before, but your concentration, observations, and anticipations are what can stop you being involved in an incident. Like I said earlier, I've sat in many people's cars, and they're third or second in the queue at a roundabout, and they're already looking to go, and I'm like, what you're looking for? It's not your turn yet. You might as well not even look. So and again, that can help with the not the fraudulent bumps at the roundabout, but the ones that were unnecessary. You're looking to go and you can see the gap, but the person in front of you might not see it. And that's another one. Distances. Keep enough distance between you and the vehicle in front. Look for, like Peter said, any people looking round. That's always a clue. If there's 4 people in a car and they're looking at you, they're not trying to take the telephone number off the commercial vehicle or see who's behind them to give them a wave. They are looking to position themselves very nicely for a couple of personal injury claims. Vehicles approaching and like I say, potential, blind spots. People, we know that people sort of like wait, the fraudsters wait at blind spots, for want of a better word. If there's a road sign that says stop, you have to stop. Don't just treat it like a giveaway. But these type of people do know these, and it's the same with the unmarked crossroads. Again, if you're approaching them, the fraudsters know that it's unmarked, and they will wait around for you. And they will, if you're a delivery driver and you go over that unmarked crossroads every day, they'll wait for you one day. So, I've already covered the roundabouts, and again, really, motorcyclists and mopeds and e-bikes, or whatever you want to term them as now, is use your mirrors at all times. Just sweep the windscreens, and as you're sweeping the windscreen from left and right, use your mirrors at all times. If you for the larger vehicles, ensure that you sort of like your sensors, if your sensors are bleeping, then this check that it's picked something up, and check your mirrors as much as you can. And the last one, really, the flash of the headlights. Flash of the headlights for me is 100% a no. It's an indication that you are here, that it's to warn other motorists of your presence. It's not to allow you to let somebody out, or somebody to let you out. Don't assume from a flash of the lights that everything's okay for you to make a maneuver. It's not. And in the event of an incident, then unfortunately that flash of the lights will go against you regardless.
Yeah, they're luring you into that false sense of security, aren't they?
Yeah. It's, yeah, exactly. And you just have to be. I mean, just be suspicious of everybody. For me, a road traffic incident is an invitation to a party. It's up to you whether you want to turn up. And depending on if you turn up, depends on whether the party's then going to get really heated, like Peter covered. Sometimes now some of the fraudsters are now, trying to be intimidating and bullying to the older generation, which is then getting them to, pay out unnecessarily for the claim. Because obviously these type of people have already been round to the house and tried to get you to buy a new roof when you don't need one. So, these are the type of people, and again, just look out for the vehicles that are, already battered, as it says there in one of the bullet points. If it's blowing out, enough smoke from a diesel that it's burning oil, then there's another indicator that somebody's not looking after the vehicle. Again, for us as a business, we offer free dash cams to our company car providers. I've got one in, and all of our vehicles have got cameras in. And as Peter said earlier, the cameras are the best friend, because if you are involved in an incident where you have generally had some personal injury, we offer that footage to our drivers free of charge. We don't charge that at all. So one of the obstacles, if your colleagues or drivers are not wanting the cameras, one of the things that we said is we would offer that out as a free of charge if they wanted to make, if they had a genuine cause for personal injury. But cameras can change literally the way of the world. But again, just make sure you're sourcing the cameras that either it records to an SD card, or it records to a cloud, or you can get access to it. And as well as that, with the cameras, just make sure they're all working. Make sure from time to time that you've checked that it's recording to either the cloud or the DVR unit, or it's actually recording to the SD as well.
Brilliant. So I mean, these are all great points. How do we get driver engagement to take on these points and actually observe these best practice?
I think it's through training. Like Peter said earlier, we analyze every single incident at Speedy, and we put it into a 3-stage, what should we say, blameworthy incident. So, was it 100% non-blameworthy? Was it 90%, 6%? And, we analyze everything, and then that then goes into our fleet management system, where you then issue with a risk score. If the risk score goes up, you would then be offered sort of like training, whether that classroom, computer e-learning, or whether it be one-to-one. But we also offer that out even if the incident is deemed as 100% non-blameworthy, because some drivers, and what we say to drivers is, don't look at the training as a naughty thing. The cost of having a half day or a full day driver training is creeping into the sort of like the £600 a day with professionals. So, treat it as a professional driving day, really. They're here to give you, they're there to support you and give you some advice, not there to, they've already assessed basically your driving from the report on the accident report. But, tell them what you want, get the drivers to engage with the trainers and get them to sort of like say, can you look at sort of like, my actions when I'm approaching or I'm navigating, traffic islands and things like that. Sometimes, if you panic when you're in the wrong lane, they get them to focus on that. It can bring dividends, and we've seen some great results from, like I say, training people who were 100% non-blameworthy and the ones who were blameworthy.
So do you do that with new drivers as well, Gareth? When you get new drivers, do you send somebody out with them, or is it just...
all of our new drivers are buddied up with another driver for a week. And all our commercial vehicles have got Samsara units in, which allows, obviously the Samsara unit does in-cab coaching as well, which is really great. But the Samsara cameras and the reports now form the basis of the probation period. But also, as well as that, they form the basis of their lifespan at whilst employed at Speedy. And they're proving very, very good. You know, we've had some fantastic results in our speeding figures and our naughty driving behaviours, if you like. We've seen some great figures, and now that's starting to really, pay fruits of the loom.
Perfect. I mean, in your experience, thanks, Gareth. In your experience, Peter, now within your current role, is this something that fleets are doing proactively or just reactively once a driver's had an accident?
Yeah, that's really interesting because look, we've looked at some really bad stuff that's going on today, haven't we? Yeah, we already know, most of us know that driving's the most dangerous activity that most of us do for work. Okay, so and it's getting worse, isn't it? Because actually, incidents used to be things that just went wrong, whereas now we're being targeted as well. So actually, I think the key bit is we've all got to take a step back, but actually your drivers and your fleet is a really important part of your overall business as a company. And I see far too many times, particularly through like an AFP training point, so I do some of the training for the AFP. We get some really good operators, and what Gareth's just been mentioning there, that being really proactive, really helping the drivers. What I think seems to need to happen is, because we are all drivers, we all have that expectation that, well, we've got a driving license, we're all going to do the right thing. So it starts with raising the profile of your drivers within your organization. Yeah, we've got to help them. We've got to give them the tools and equipment. And hopefully, from what we've talked about today, you may find that you're on that. We do the right thing. And those of you that may be not doing the right thing, or not quite as good as you possibly should be or could be doing, just thinking about, are you really helping those drivers? And it's, as I say, it's dangerous activity. People resist training, particularly driver training as a general, because, well, I've got a driving license, and how dare somebody criticize my driving? But and actually, the interesting part there, driver training in itself will not solve everything. So when we're looking at motorists that flash their headlights, right? So it is a big issue, but there are also some drivers out there that are doing it out of courtesy, and it gets to that battle of, how do we know that that's out of courtesy, or how do we know that, or is that somebody that's just trying to induce a crash? It's a really difficult environment. So not only is it the most dangerous activity, it's one of the hardest activities that an organization, your people, actually do now, because it can cost your business so much money, and it can impact. We sometimes also forget the fact that when people crash, it reflects on their own personal car insurance or their bike insurance, because it's a declarable incident. And if we can get the scammers to not target us, then you're doing right as a business. So try and look at your strategy as to, are we doing enough? If we're not, what can we do to help drivers and engage with drivers? And Speedy is a good example of, engagement, and it's not resisted. That, oh, you want a dash cam, they're going to cost £20 from Amazon. It's not, it shouldn't be like that. So yeah, culture of the business is quite a key element to address, and hopefully we all learn to avoid as much of the scammers as we possibly can do.
I think Gareth made a good point about be suspicious. So quite a lot of the times when somebody flashes you, they are being kind and letting you out or whatever, but don't assume that. Because they might not be, and actually, that they might be luring you into an accident. So always be suspicious of what the drivers do. I think some of the things that, in my experience going around seeing various fleets and fleet managers, is trying to get the point across to the drivers in terms that they can understand. I saw one company years ago, and they described a crash within their roadshow as they manufactured ice cream, and they described how many trucks of ice cream they had to sell to fund a typical accident, to just try and get that point across to drivers in a tangible way that they might save themselves half an hour, or they might, cut corners and all that kind of thing. But the real cost to the business and to them personally is huge, and how to get that point across to them.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Peter. But now move on to questions and answers. I've got one question here. I'll ask Gareth first of all. If you could just have 3 things that from this presentation that you wanted to get across to fleet managers that they should focus on, 3 things, what would they be, Gareth?
Analyze your incidents.
Yeah.
Really analyze those incidents and look for trends. Adopt new innovation and equipment, and get yourself a bump card, because that then saves different people obtaining different bits of information. It's all set out in the bump card.
The bump card makes perfect sense, because the driver's going to be in a stress situation if they're being bullied.
The drivers are already, the drivers are already stressed, and they might be injured. And the last thing they want to do is find a piece of paper, find a pen, and they just really want to phone somebody they love and say they're all right. So the bump card has got everything written down, but it's also got everything written on it for the third party. So there's no, well, you need to tell me who you work for. No, I don't. It's all on the bump card.
Perfect. Thanks, Gareth. Peter, 3 more things that Gareth hasn't mentioned.
Oh, wow. I think he stole the show there. Help your drivers. Yeah. Key bit, help them pre and post collision. People fall down really, really badly that have good procedures in place but don't get effectively communicated. Understand changes within your business and what impacts that has in terms of your risk profile. Keep alert, and that's not just drivers. That's the changing landscape. Listen into gather as much information, but get an understanding from a driving point. But the main points have really been covered massively there by Gareth. So it's tough out there. It's really, really tough out there, and and it's not easy. We can say, oh, if somebody flashes your headlights, coming back to the headlights, don't do that. It might be an invite to have a staged incident. But then if you don't do that, then you get pressure from other road users that are around you, particularly in a city centre location, that they're not going to be best pleased as well. So put that sphere as to what the pressure is on the individual driver at that point. And probably the key bit for me is the biggest target audience needs to be your non-regular company vehicle drivers. And I'm talking there about people that, don't drive, we're not looking at truck drivers, etc. It's focusing on the skill sets to give the sales exec or, the IT engineer the knowledge and the experience effectively to try and avoid crashes in the first place, because be all happier place. The only people that won't be happy ultimately will be the fraudsters. And my final part is the insurance industry get very bad press and very bad sort of commentary, and they don't always get it right, but what they are trying to do is they're trying to eliminate that as much as possible. The issue is that it's a legal requirement, and if it was a non-legal requirement, I'm not so sure that insurers would actually be in that industry sector because of the issues that are going on. It comes back to the fact it's unlimited fines that you need, or unlimited funds that you need for a tragic incident. But not forget that the insurance industry is factored more for those large tragic situations that occur. And that's what we all pay for. What we can't factor in is a significant increase in slow speed manoeuvring type instance, which really is just a pound swapping exercise. So try not to knock the insurance industry. they are trying their best, they're trying their hardest with the information that they need to have, but always think about, you know, you ultimately pay for your slow speed maneuvering through your bottom line anyway, so why not, you know, try to raise your profile of your drivers.
Control that. Perfect. Thanks very much, Peter. Thanks, Gareth. So I don't think we've got any more questions, so let me just talk about the forthcoming AFP events. So we've got the Fleet Operator Dinner, which is in Warwickshire, which is the night before the Expo, so that's on the 8th of September. We've got the AFP Expo, which is at the British Motor Museum in Gaydon, 9th of September. So that's a great venue. The Expo's growing from strength to strength every year. So yeah, really suggest you, if you can find the time, to come along to that. We've got the Fleet Operator Online Forum on the 15th of September. And we've got the Fleet Operator Dinner at Hampton Manor, which is after day one of Fleet Management Live, which is on the 6th of October. So within our website, if you go to the events area, you can book yourself a spot on any of the above events. So please do use our website and book yourself on those events. We've also got talk about the train, which is this big aspect of the AFP. So we've got Making the Switch to Electric Vehicles, which is a half-day online course, and that's on the 11th of August, beg your pardon. Operational Electric LCV Fleet Strategy, another half-day course, 9th of September. We've got the Fleet Vehicle Management Foundation course, 6th and 7th of October in Coventry. Women's Voices in Fleet, still a topical thing, still pushing that, and it's still a really important thing to make sure that the women's voices are heard. That's on the 12th and 13th of October in Lichfield. The next strategic cohort kickoff is the 14th and 15th of October in Birmingham. And we've got a new advanced course, which is running from the 19th to the 23rd of October, which is a 1-week intensive course. Each stage of the learning journey is aligned to the final assessment, the development of a robust business case proposal. So again, you can find out more about all of these courses and book your course on our website. So this webinar will be available on our members area, but we've also got the following webinars also available, these historic ones. Is now the right time to electrify more of your fleet, which is obviously very topical for every fleet out there. Salary sacrifice and EV tax changes, what fleet operators need to know. Opening up fleet work experience for young people. The road ahead. OEM set targets and market direction, new tech in fleet and uses of AI for fleet managers, fines management, and demystifying insurance. So lots of really, really valuable information for our members there, and it's all available to you. Just need to go into the members area, and it's just brilliant, useful information. So hope you can take advantage of that. So what I'd like to do is thank Gareth and Peter. Been really interested to have your input on today's webinar, and to you, our audience, for listening and also taking the time to, well, we only got one question here, but hopefully you found the content useful and can take some of these points that Peter and Gareth have made and put that into your working practices. So thanks everybody, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.